Hello and welcome to my Esoteric Explorer channel. My name's Paul, your host. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I've recently discovered the National CV of Britain. So what is the National CV of Britain? It is a wonderful website where you can access all sorts of information on Britain. And what's particularly caught my interest is the historical aspect of the website, because you've got so much information on there, particularly focused on what we used to call the Dark Ages, I suppose, really. And there's all sorts of stuff on there about early Christianity in Britain, about the various King Arthurs that Britain has had, particularly in the early part of the first millennium. So I've got with me today the author of the National CV of Britain, John Hart, who's been with us before. I did a video on metrology with him and Hugh Evans about a month ago, which was very enjoyable. So without further ado, here is the author of the National CV of Britain, Mr. John Hart. Welcome back, John.
Greetings to you.
Yes, okay. So I suppose I'd like to thank you to start with for compiling this National CV of Britain. It's an amazing resource, and I've been logging onto it now for about a month or so, and I've probably got through about 5% of its contents, to be quite honest. It's a huge resource for people. So what prompted you to set up the CV of Britain, and what's been the response, John?
In about 2008, I decided to produce a potted version of British history. It was a piece of pioneering because I wanted to encapsulate British history in the smallest possible space. So my brief to myself was, be brief. And at the time, I had two daughters in school, and the teaching of history in schools is utterly lamentable. It's unbelievably awful. You get a load of Nazis, you get slavery, of course, and you get, what do you get? A history of medicine or something. I mean, you don't get the kings and queens of England or anything like that anymore. So I decided to produce a potted history of the country in the form of a personal CV, a curriculum vitae, a course of life in Latin, of course. So this is a career history, and this would be in favour of the influential islanders, that's us, because we are the most, I claim, disproportionately influential nation on Earth, given that at any one particular time. Have we lost some light?
No, you're all right. We can see you clearly. Carry on.
At any one time, we're always less than 1% of the total population of the Earth, and yet we, for example, created the modern world with the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the second agricultural revolution, and the constitutional monarchy, which I'm a great fan of, and so on. And we, of course, did the jet engine and television and all sorts of, penicillin and endless other things. It was great fun. And so this is in 2008. And I had a go at it, and apart from the shocking state of history teaching in British schools, which I really was very irritated about, there was also, of course, we'd won the Olympic bid for the London 2012. So first of all, I put together a group. I actually wrote the CV, and after a bit, I realized that I would have to validate in a very scientific way, I'm in fact a scientist, each of my claims. So I produced the National CVpedia of Britain, and pedia, of course, as you know, means learning. So that if you get to encyclopedia, you're learning in a circle. So the CVpedia exists, so you can drill down. And then I thought, actually, we even need another tier of information, because you need to expand various relatively controversial points. So I've got a tier of more articles, and I think we're up to about 30. And I put together a group who were very interested, had different interests. One, for example, was interested in a long mooted Museum of Britain. Another one wanted to do a local CV. And in fact, I'm speaking from a part of Hampshire here, and he did a local CV as while I did a national CV. And the thing actually exists. Here is Britain in brief. It's a 2-pager. I know this comes around the other way on your picture, but there it is. And it says at the top there, the national CV, applying for the future. And the point about this, you see, I decided to configure this as a personal CV. So it's an exercise in personification. The idea is you've got to be brief. So encapsulating a nation's historical profile in a CV is no small task. Yet for the reader I've written here, the output needs to represent just that, a small task. So it's easy to use. Be accurate, of course, and as upbeat as your story warrants. Use a timeline that is reversed. In other words, we load from the top. You know, every new thing that happens, it loads from the top. And be ready to add things as they happen. It's a cumulative document. But the absolutely crucial point is that it's future oriented. And because I'm one of the nation's greatest poets, I produced a ditty. Dwell in the centuries to make yourself wise, but don't tarry too long. The future's the prize.
Oh, very nice. I like that. Brilliant. Yeah, so you mentioned quite rightly that Britain has had a disproportionate influence on the rest of the world over the last, I don't know, probably hundreds of years, if not longer. And yet,
thousands.
Quite possibly. And yet at the same time, your average Brit knows virtually nothing about our ancient history, or even history probably going back more than 500 years. When I was at school, when I did my history GCSE, we studied the Russian Revolution and the Vietnam War, which had taken place about 25 years previous to me studying it. So we didn't do anything on Britain, anything about the kings and queens, anything British, basically. And so on the one hand, we've been a very influential country in world affairs, and yet at the same time, our students are taught absolutely nothing about it. And if you go beyond the Saxons, officially speaking, we know virtually nothing. What's going on with all that? It doesn't seem to make any sense on the surface, John.
Well, on the website, there's a piece about us, because I put together a little group on this. We have created a CV for the entire country because we are startled that the amnesia and ignorance about Britain's record of pioneering achievements across any number of fields of human endeavour over the centuries. Believe me, we are going to dissipate the cloud of unknowing. The aims are to make the inhabitants of these isles, particularly our young people, more aware of their tremendous pioneering history, which saw Britain launch the modern world, for example, and to relish the history with pride, to inspire us all to greater things in our lives going forward. And I mean, what's happened since then? I mean, at that point, you could diagnose amnesia. Now you can diagnose, I mean, something much worse, a kind of dystopia, so that our children, I was only reading this, it's in the key stage something or other at school, they're invited to compare the British Empire with the Third Reich, and you just read these things, and it's just awful. This is the left-wing version view of history, where you peer up the rear end of history and declare it dark. And wokery is withering the West from within, to give you a W alliteration. We had to do something, and we attracted sponsorship from British Telecom, which was a co-sponsor to the London 2012. And that actually proved to be a double-edged sword, because, of course, they gave us money, which was good because we needed to establish a website and get out to the schools. And we fanned out and gave these talks and all the rest of it. It was great fun, actually. All the children really absolutely, well, I think they were captivated. And they've never heard any of this stuff before.
Yeah, exactly.
And well, the other thing was that the BT, there was the guy who was our champion left. How could that happen? And then we were replaced by a lady. and she wasn't in the least interested in it. And so our efforts to, for example, improve the opening ceremony and closing ceremony and all this was completely thwarted. Only afterwards did she apologize, and she said she just did not realize how popular patriotism would be. And she was responsible for BT doing the Olympics and didn't actually cotton on to how people were thinking. It was just very strange. But anyway, we did that. That's what we did. So the National CV then had a second coming, as it were, which I can tell you about in a second.
Well, patriotism seems to be on the return, on the comeback with Trump in America at the moment, doesn't it? So patriotism isn't dead, so it would seem.
He's the anti-woke candidate.
He certainly is, yeah. Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, I agree. I mean, America is in a good situation on that. We've got shall I put it, the unpatriots of Remain. We have one of them who campaigned for a second referendum. Yes, well, it's just, I mean, the Brexit, you see, that was the thing. That was the National CV second act was Brexit. It was, I didn't know we were going to get a referendum. And when the group, which by then had expanded, I mean, it's like an invisible college, which was the precursor to the Royal Society. As I say, I do a bit of science. And we configured ourselves like an invisible college. And when we talked about it, we were all Brexiteers, except actually one person who exited stage right when we announced that we would go for Brexit. And so the website, if you go on it, I haven't done it for years, but anything with it for years. But at the time, it was a Brexit, became a Brexit thing. And we did, if you click up on the top right of the homepage, and the way viewers can get to it is just National CV of Britain homepage, and at top right is the cartoons. We produce a whole load of cartoons on Brexit, and some of them are actually blooming good, I must say. I was very pleased with them, and they're still there. I found that they were still operational. It's a trip down memory lane, actually.
Right, okay. Well, let's, on that point, let's see if we can bring up the CV briefly, just to have a brief tour of it, of the website. So can you see that, John, at the moment?
No, I can't see anything.
Right, bear with me a minute.
I can see you and me.
Yeah, okay. Let's see if I can. There it is there. Okay. Bear with one moment. There it is.
I've got it on my PC here.
What about now?
Yeah, that's actually the more articles. Go move your cursor up to the top and get to the home page.
Here we are.
There you go. Now,
okay.
Shall I mention the artwork? The artwork was done by a London artist called John Chappell, and we've also got music on the site. So if you see those purple buttons there.
Yes, I've heard. It's very good.
I can't quite read it. Oh, was it? Listen, the middle one.
Yes.
You could listen to the theme of the National CV, which was written by a bloke called Steve Sharples, who contributed to the music for the film Moulin Rouge. And so we had all sorts of things going on. And I even had a T-shirt made up. You can't see me on screen at the moment. I will show you the T-shirt in a minute. So that's what we've done. And now if you look where the cursor is at the top, it says home.
Yep.
And you go to CV, and that's the actual document. There's the National. Yeah, this is the longer version. And go to what's the next one down? I can't see.
CVpedia.
That's the one. So then you go to the CVpedia. Now you look on the left there. You see the logo is a globe inside the country. And then you've got these different M classification, because when I did the whole thing, I suddenly realized that you could understand British history in its entirety in terms of M. So right at the bottom is marvels, which covers everything. But then you've got megaliths, which we all know about, Stonehenge and so on. Yep. Mining, we were, of course, Tin Island.
Yep.
And then the monarchs, we have the longest tradition of monarchy in the world. And then modernity, we are the originators of the modern world. not any other country. And then momentum are a series of things like we get Nobel Prizes and do all sorts of exciting stuff. And that's it. So, and then you go, the thing you showed originally is the next one down, which
Yeah,
is,
more articles.
yeah, if you click on that, and there you've got, now, those are scholarly articles. Now, that in itself is a resource. If you read any one of those, you'll find that it's absolutely packed with information. It's all free, of course.
This is what I first discovered myself on here, was the more articles section, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's amazing. It's an incredible resource for any budding historian like myself. As you can see with this, the very first page here, we've got Lucius of Britain was the world's first Christian king in the 2nd century AD. And this is one of many things that isn't discussed by academic historians, if you like. They don't accept this as real history, and yet it's you know, you can find this in more than one source. This information, I believe, this comes from Percy Enderby, doesn't it, John?
Yeah, he was one of the great historians. He was let me think, Charles II historian.
Yeah.
And so Lucius was the way to get to Lucius actually is if you see the second More article, it says Constantine the Great's mother, St. Helen of the Cross, was British. Now, there's been a very strange piece of sleight of hand has been occurred, which has been to the great disadvantage of Britain. And I call it the Helen test of any historian, actually, because the situation is we are in about 306. I like that, about. We're in 306, AD 306, and Constantine the Great has taken the imperial purple. So he's the Roman emperor. And his mother was Helen of Colchester. But for some reason, a bit later in the history of the world, a character called he's amazing, he's canonized. But anyway, St. Ambrose, who's the Bishop of Milan, I believe, decided that she was a barmaid from the Mediterranean. And ever since then, scholars have treated her with a complete disrespect. But you've got the very deep. I've said this to historians, and they've said it's because he was a misogynist, and he certainly was a misogynist, I'm sure. But actually, that's actually a piece of persiflage all on its own. The thing to do is to wind back to the early days of the Roman Catholic Church, and there was this phenomenon in the Middle East, as you undoubtedly know, called Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. Which was a kind of rival, and was much more, in fact, more balanced than Christianity. But it was a deadly enemy of Roman Catholics, who basically got rid of the Gnostics and got rid of their texts. So we got, fragmentary texts of theirs and so forth. Those more and more have come to light, which is one of the paradoxes of history, incidentally, is the further away you go, the more you understand it. But so what the Roman Catholic did is suppress Christianity, or Gnosticism in the Far East. What isn't understood by British people is that they did exactly the same to British Christianity, because it was an efflorescence from Druidism, and we both know Druid Lawrence, who's such a wonderful eccentric and so forth. But he told me, and I know it's right, is that the Druids foresaw the arrival of Jesus before anybody, and he called him Esser, as in Essenes. And what I think the Roman Catholics did is suppress Britain's Christian history. We were Christians. We were the first Christian nation on earth, as it happens. And it was because the Druids were ready and waiting and they had all these arch-flamens who became archbishops and so forth. And that's why Helen has been exterminated from the record. It's because her lineage, which we know completely and includes Lucius, the first, well, in fact, he was the second pope, because they always say St. Peter was the first. Though, as an aside, if you try and find St. Peter in Rome, it's extremely difficult to do so. But anyway, that's outside the remit of the National CV Group. But Helen was removed from the canon of British greats for strategic reasons. It was nothing to do with misogyny. It was to do with eliminating Britain as the first Christian nation. So I feel I have to, although I've mentioned that the National CV Group is an invisible college, we actually see ourselves as the heirs to Holinshead, who was, of course, Shakespeare's esteemed historian. In fact, Shakespeare absolutely loved Holinshead because he did an incredible, with a group. He was a group. He wasn't, again, it was like a National CV Group. He wasn't an individual. He was a group of scholars. And so among my treasured possessions, this is the first volume of Holinshead. You can spend your entire life reading Holinshead. It's just wonderful. Yeah. And he's got it all in there. He's got all the Helen stuff and everything else. And it's just brilliant. But modern historians don't read it. And so that, for example, Oxford University have a Holinshead project, and they announced a breakthrough in East Anglian kingship. It's pretty obscure stuff, but we're in the 700s or something like that. And the breakthrough was that they'd read Holinshead and worked out the king list. And I thought, give me strength. Every historian of Britain should read Holinshead. I mean, and Percy Enderby, who you mentioned, another fine historian. It's actually available. The information is available.
So yeah, just going back to the more articles section of, let me just share that again. Bear with me one moment as I share screen. Going back, there we go. So you should be able to see that again now. So yeah, so going back to the more articles section of the National CV, if you read through the list here, you can see that we've got, it starts off with early Christianity in Britain, which, as we've just established now, goes back far beyond the official dating, which I think, if I'm right, is 5th or 6th century.
Yeah, Augustine. Yeah.
That's
Augustine
right.
came there, and he was so, I've read, only just been reading about that, and he was so worried about the natives would kill him off that he decided to be in Canterbury because he could escape quickly. But yeah, the idea that we got Christianity then is laughable. And it's just completely laughable. I mean, you and I have been in mid Wales, and they've got churches going back to 500 and something, and that's relatively late. I was in one the other day, which is again, it was one of the relatives of King Arthur who founded it, and so it's the idea that we were the first Christian nation. One of our group actually is of Armenian extraction. And he said, oh, no, Armenia was the first Christian nation. And I said, well, when was that? And he said 300s. And I said, are you joking? We were quarter of a millennium before you. You only got to, I mean, it's so easy. Go to the Acts of the Apostles and read the names. The names of the British royal family are in there, including, I don't think Linus is in there because he was later, but they're all in there. And if you read the Roman historian Tacitus, he has Caractacus being paraded through Rome because he's been captured. So this is the British resistance in the mid 1st century. But the Romans, Emperor Claudius and the rest of them, were so impressed with Caractacus that instead of doing what they usually do with barbarians, we top them at the first opportunity, they gave him a palace. And that palace became the British embassy in Rome. But way back there, when Caractacus was going, he was visited by St. Paul, and St. Paul wrote up his visit. And you don't even have to seek hard to find this material. That the famous speech by Caractacus used to be known by all school children. in the 19th century, but it's completely disappeared now.
Wow, didn't know that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, Caractacus said, just because you would lord it over the world, does it follow that we'll be slaves? We have a noble history. And it was an absolutely superb speech. And he must have done it in Latin. I mean, they were very cultured people.
Yes,
He didn't do it in some obscure language these linguists talk about.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I don't know. It's all great fun. I mean, the thing to do is the CV is buoyant. It's got to be upbeat in a justifiable way, and that's what we try to achieve.
Oh, I think you have done. Okay, just going back to St. Helen of the Cross, who was allegedly a barmaid, but I think she was a regal character, wasn't she?
She was the daughter of King Cole, but not
Yes.
old King Cole of the nursery rhyme. His grandson, I think, or great grandson, and they lived. You won't be surprised to hear in Colchester.
Yes.
And what happened was Britain was at the time breaking away from the Roman Empire, and so the Romans sent a great general, and I think by that time he was probably one of the emperors of the West, Constantius Chlorus. And Constantius, I don't know, it's a very strange way of fighting a war, but they sort of agreed they'd meet on a certain day, and it was outside Colchester, and Colchester had a city wall, and Constantius, as they say, and probably somewhere in London, copped a gorp at Helen on the parapet, and decided that there was something better to do than have a stupid war. So he agreed, and her father agreed that he would marry her, and that's what he did. And that is the mother of Constantine the Great.
Incredible.
One of the very important reasons we know that this is true is because of a character who you may or may not have heard of called Cardinal Baronius. Now, Cardinal Baronius is he's actually one of my very few heroes. And the reason why is that he felt that it was his destiny given him by God to tell the truth. And people tried to bribe him because he was writing, I should explain. We're in the period of Elizabeth I, though we're over in Italy, of course. So it's the second half of the 1500s. And he's writing an ecclesiastical history of the Roman Catholic Church. And of course, he goes right back and all the rest of it. And in the end, in his lifetime, he produces 40 folio volumes. And now this thing I showed you of Holinshed, that's a folio. So it's a big job. And as a matter of fact, these have never been translated into English as far as I can determine. But he was bribed, he was bullied, he was all sorts of things. And he was just completely incorruptible. And he said, and he is on record as saying, the man must be mad who thinks that Constantine and his mother Helen were anything other than Britons from the island of Britain. That was one of the great truth tellers in all of history, said that. And yet you still get academics saying, oh no. In fact, Edward Gibbon even said she was a barmaid from I mean, God, how did he fall for that one?
Well, there are similarities there, aren't there, between St. Helen and Mary Magdalene in the way that their reputation has been tarnished over the last 2,000 years.
Yeah, that's a deep question that I'm going to leave that one to you. But St. Helen has been obliterated from history, and so is Arthur, of course, and Lucius, as you mentioned, the second pope, the first one you can actually trace in history, and yet we've got the family trees of these people, and you and I have been to churches where, one of Arthur died, and you know all this sort of stuff. We know. There's a danger looking at British history of succumbing to cognitive dissonance, because you see, well, why is it that this obvious material is not being taught in schools, and why is it not known, and why is it controversial, and why are we talking about it as legendary? It's not legendary.
No,
I don't know.
Well, Is it Graham Hancock says that we're a species with amnesia? I mean, we're certainly a race of people with amnesia as far as our history is concerned. But I suppose is there if you sever a people from their history, do you weaken them? Do you make them more vulnerable to I don't know, dystopian control in some way? Quite possibly. Who can say? Anyway, just going back to St. Helen. St. Helen is known as St. Helen of the Cross. Now, there's a story that's recorded that she went to the Holy Land.
It's not a story. She did.
Sorry, wrong choice of word there. Yes, okay.
I mean, it's a true narrative. That's what I meant.
Okay. So, and as that narrative tells us, she brought back the cross to Britain, and it's now allegedly at a place called Nevern in Wales. How much credence do you give that narrative, John?
Well, there's absolutely no doubt about it. She took half a legion to the Holy Land. There's no doubt she did. But there's been I don't know if you've ever seen the Monty Python sketch about this. And John Cleese is a Roman centurion, and I forget exactly. I think it's probably Michael Palin does the. Oh no, maybe it's Terry Jones. Anyway, somebody does the a Jewish sort of middleman peasant type, and John Cleese says to him, "We're looking for the true cross," and the other character says, "What would that be then?" Well, a sort of a crucifix for Jesus. Jesus. Well, and then the other, the Jewish thing comes out, and he goes, how big would that be? And he said, well, it's got to be this big. And it's sort of that sort of thing. Yeah, right. Come back later this afternoon.
Yeah.
But she did find something, and she brought it back to Britain. And of course, she travelled along these roads called St. Helen roads, and in Britain we've got a town called St. Helens, and of course Saint Helena. She was Empress Helena, and you see, one of the things that should baffle historians, but apparently they don't think about these things, is that she was called Queen Empress Helena. Queen. Her father died, and she became the Queen of Britain. There's no barmaid is going to become the queen of anything, except perhaps of our hearts, because barmaids are a lovely species. But so, St. Helen is just, as I say, you get cognitive dissonance if you listen to mainstream historians. I don't know what they do.
There's one or two great videos of Nevern in Wales, and the place where the cross is supposed to be kept to this day. It's all been walled up, and it looks like it's in the middle of a forest or something. Yeah, you can watch Britain's Hidden History channel on YouTube, and they've got a couple of great videos on there talking about this.
Well, you notice, that Moore article. It was written by Alan Wilson.
Yes.
He's no longer with us, sadly, but he wrote that. They very kindly contributed that, and you see, if you look down the list, there's some big hitters in there.
Yes, there certainly is, definitely. I mean, if we look at the next one, number 3 on the list, we've got Joseph of Arimathea came to Britain. Now, that's been a so-called legend in this country, going back obviously 2,000 years. How much truth do you place on this, John, on this story?
I think it was true. I don't see any difficulty with it being true. I mean, I'll give you another one. St. Paul's Cathedral is called St. Paul's because St. Paul came to Britain.
Yeah.
I mean, why bother with a different hypothesis? I mean, it is even, I could go on, but I won't. But I'm a scientist, you see, and the way you operate is you say you can try to the idea is you falsify a hypothesis. It's a form of intellectual rigor, which is astounding. Really, it's a very clever invention, and invented here. and the other thing you can do is you can try and disprove a hypothesis, or you can say what follows if it's true, and then you get to a different kind of thought process, and you say what follows if it's true if Helen was British, or Joseph of Arimathea came to Britain, and so on, and you get a rich array of family trees and all sorts of things. But what follows if it isn't true is you don't get anything at all. There's nothing there, and that's exactly what happens. That's what's our history has cavitated because we don't accept this. And it's true also of all the kings BC. We don't accept any of those. They're all legendary, even though King Lear gave his name to Leicester, things like that. And we've got Brenius, I forget what he did. Oh, I know. He went over and sacked Rome, which is a really good one. I mean, it's like a football hooligan. It's wonderful. We sent a football hooligan over there and he sacked Rome. I mean, you don't have to, that's in the British Chronicles, as we both know. But also, it's in the Roman Chronicles that it was, he was described as a leader of the Celts. Celts, incidentally, I regard that as a ridiculous word to associate with Britain. But as a matter of fact, he did go on the continent and led a group which really were Celts.
Is this the guy that was, I read Marcel Abraham's book, Great Migrations. Yeah. Is this the Brennus that was related to Brutus in some way?
Yeah, he was a descendant, lineal descendant. Yeah, that's right. He was a lineal descendant. He went, he fell out with his brother, you see, and his brother was the king of Britain. And he fell out with him, so he went on the continent. I think he led. I mean, I ought to read my own CVpedia, but he led the Burgundians, I think, to sack Rome. And you say, what you're looking for on these things are third-party validations, and the Romans say that. And in fact, the Romans called him Brennus, and we called him Brennius. So there's an I between us. But what's the point of what? It's perfect. And there are other correspondences. And you just think, well, why is any of this material regarded as legendary? It's not legendary. It happened.
Exactly.
You mentioned Marshall, who's written this wonderful book, which actually is in a pile of books just to my left here. And she passes the Helen test because she's got it absolutely spot on. And so she's a good egg.
Brilliant. Okay, just one interesting point there, going back to Joseph of Arimathea. Our friend Ralph Ellis conflates the character Joseph of Arimathea with Josephus Flavius, and he also conflates that character with St. Paul. And these are the two characters, according to our history here, that came to Britain and preached in the first century. So I don't know. Have you read Ralph's 4-part trilogy on the Jesus character?
Yeah, I have. I don't know. I may have missed the last one. I don't know when the last one.
The Grail Cipher. Yeah.
When was that? Was that 2 or 3 years ago? Or
possibly 7 or 8 now. I think. Yeah.
7 or 8.
Yeah.
Oh well, I probably have read it then. I mean, you can't see it here, but I've got a picture on the wall that was Ralph's. I forget what it was actually. He gave it me as a gift. It's a picture of one of his covers, but I mean, it's the original artwork. You can't see it; it's over there. But and he and I are great pals. I think you say conflate. You're absolutely right. It is quite awkward. There are extraordinary correspondences between St. Paul's and the other character. Who's the other bloke? Not Joseph Arimathea. Who's the other bloke?
Josephus Flavius.
That's the one. Yeah, you see, he's a very historically attested character. You know his address. You know his everything you could possibly know. And St. Paul isn't as well attested, but quite well attested. I mean, I've got St. Paul. No, not Joseph of Arimathea. No, not Joseph. Josephus. Josephus wrote the Antiquities of the Jews. Mm-hmm. I've got a version of that. I married a lady who was the daughter of a vicar, and the vicar had an amazing library, and I've got it. I've got it. So I've got a version of that. I'm not. I don't think obviously it's not a first edition because that would be 2,000 years old. But it's actually. I mean, it's quite amazing. I couldn't believe it because it was all wrapped up in brown paper, beautifully preserved. And I open it up, and there's the Antiquities of the Jews by Josephus. But I don't. This thing where you find people. I'm you conflate, as you put it. I find it. I know Marshall does that too with a couple of things, and I find
it could be a great way of taking out a character from history by kind of fragmenting them and kind of casting them into two different or more than two different characters. And I've read Ralph's books, obviously, and I personally think he makes a very strong case for that. Lawrence Main says that Joseph of Arimathea was Joseph, as in Jesus's father.
Oh, really?
Well, I don't know if that's him. I don't know, a supposition, or if he's actually got any historical information. That
he knows an awful lot.
He does, exactly. So again, that's very interesting.
You've done a really fine service by memorializing him in video form, because
yes, I just hope I get the opportunity to do it again. Because,
you don't. The thing about Lawrence is obviously he's amazingly digressive at times. Well, yes. I'm never digressive. But the longer you make those videos, the better. I mean, the modern world wants blips and this sort of things and little things. I wouldn't bother with that. This is a historical document.
Yes.
And Lawrence isn't going to be here forever. I'm not either. I'm now 70. My children have long since left school. And I started the National CV in 2008, so that's my mid-50s, and that was all powered by indignation, and the indignation has got worse. But just for a short time, when I wrote the National CV, it did get it off my chest, and I walked around. I had greater stature and poise and everything, but ever since then I've gone. Yeah.
Well, I think it needs more exposure, definitely, and that's what this video is about today. I'm going to be sharing information off of there with your permission, obviously. And
it's a free resource. Just go for it.
Great. Okay.
Just go for it. Mind you, if you do a website like the National CV, you will find your material pirated right across the globe, and then somebody will write. I really do mean this, and people will then write to you and say, "How could you put your material on this website?" And you go, "Am I on a North Korean website?" Or I was on a Jewish website. I didn't have any problem with any of that at all. But I thought, well, they might at least have said where they got it all from. Just say it comes from the National CV of Britain, not not passing it off as your own material. I mean, that's just. So I mean, you use it. I want people just to use it.
Brilliant. Okay, well that's good to know. I'm going to get stuck in now, and there's, as we were saying offline, there's got to be at least 10,000 videos worth of information on there. So hopefully, John, you'll agree to come back and we can discuss some of its contents in more detail. That would be absolutely wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
I'm very happy to do it. My mission is to get the Brits, dissipate the cloud of unknowing.
Exactly.
I don't understand why we're so ignorant.
Yes,
I'm not even a historian. I'm only a history buff, you see.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll leave it there for today, John. Thank you very much for joining me, and especially thank you so much for doing this for the National CVs. As I say, it's an amazing resource. I've known about it for a month. I've gone through about 5% of what's on there. So you'll be hearing a lot more about this on this channel. Thank you for joining me today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you for another video. Cheers, John.
Bye-bye. Cheers, everybody.